So yesterday, we got news early in the morning that police here in Springfield were on a manhunt. A murder suspect out of Chicago had come to Springfield, got pulled over by apparently Illinois State Police, and something happened to where the Illinois State Police trooper was shot in the leg, and the criminal suspect was on the run. And this is in Springfield off of Toronto Road. It's the road that goes right to the University of Illinois Springfield. I used to live in apartments right in that area, and Megan and I lived there for years. We kind of watched the place change over time, but really it was rather jarring to see that because it's not typical that happens here in Springfield and Sangamon County. So obviously the manhunt there lasted from about 11 o'clock till about 2 o'clock when they caught him. 2 o'clock in the morning. So what is that, 4 hours or so it took them to find this individual armed suspect. And now we've got information that the suspect's name is Cristobal Santana. Suspect wanted in connection with the murder of Adriana Lopez, taken into custody in Springfield after shooting Illinois State Police trooper. So we've got details now, and this was shared by State Representative Bradley Fritz out of Dixon, Republican. He took to the House floor yesterday, and he shared his thoughts on what happened. And in particular, what happened was somebody got shot, an Illinois State Police trooper who is the fiance of one of his legislative staffers. Here is State Representative Bradley Fritz laying out his thoughts in a moment of silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
Please proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, last night at 10:47 p.m., Illinois State Trooper Cody Green was shot here in Springfield following an incident with a suspect in a Chicago homicide. This is personal to me because Trooper Green is engaged to my legislative aide here in Springfield, Madison Kinzel. Yesterday, I spent my morning talking to Madison about the engagement photos that they'd just taken and about the wedding plans that they have. I spent my morning this morning talking with Madison as she sits with her fiance in the ICU. During that time, I thought about what I wanted to say here today. One thing I keep thinking about is how angry that I am. I'm angry at the needless violence against our law enforcement officers. I'm angry at people who scream to defund the police. And more than that, I'm angry at this assembly is dead set on making their jobs as hard as possible without protecting them. When does it end? When does the crime wave from Chicago's soft on crime prosecutors end? When do we finally decide to back our law enforcement officers and who put their lives on the line each and every day for us? We can't go on like this any longer. We need to start prosecuting criminals and supporting law enforcement. We need to ensure that they have proper funding, that they are fully staffed, and that they know that their government unequivocally supports their efforts to make their state a safer place. I call on every single legislator here today to really think about the world that they want to live in. Do you want to live in a world that advocates for the rights of criminals? Or do you want to live in a world that protects those who protect us? Because I know what kind of a world I want to live in. But for some of us in this room, refuse to do anything to make that world a possibility. It's time to wake up, people, because someday you'll get the call that I got this morning, and it may be your own loved one. My thoughts and prayers are with Trooper Green, the state police, and most of all, our dear colleague, Madison. Madam Speaker, I ask that the body take a moment of silence.
A moment of silence. Thank you, Representative Fritz.
So, interesting message there. The state representative taking time yesterday on the House floor to address that issue. And we've already got people making political hay out of it. Not just, the state representative there, but saying that the legislature, he's upset that they have not been kind to law enforcement, that they take away tools law enforcement have, that they seem to shift support away from law enforcement, according to State Representative Fritz. But you've got, I'm sure, on the other side, Democrats who would likely push back on that sentiment. But regardless, you have others also making political hay, including a group that yesterday used this situation as a way to push for an order of protection law to require police to take firearms away from subjects that are facing domestic violence orders of protection. So the network advocating against domestic violence released a statement saying that they grieve for the family and friends of Adriana Lopez, the murdered individual that Cristobal Santana is accused of killing before they came down to Springfield from Chicago and ended up shooting a Illinois State Police trooper. But the statement goes on from the network advocating against domestic violence. They pushed forward this idea of having a order of protection bill to require police to confiscate firearms from somebody. They say that last year Chicago saw 36 firearm involved domestic violence homicides and 79 nonviolent domestic violence shootings. When domestic violence survivors go to the courts to get an order of protection, we must ensure that protection works, especially when a firearm is involved. In this case, they say, for Adriana Lopez, that failed. While we are still learning the specifics of this case, we again urge the Illinois General Assembly to pass legislation like Karina's bill to help clarify and strengthen the law around firearms and orders of protection. The heart-wrenching murder of Adriana Lopez is yet another devastating reminder of our collective failure to protect domestic violence survivors from firearms. We must act now. Big question here is, obviously, you've got the issue of firearm owners' identification cards in Illinois. It's required for somebody to legally purchase and possess firearms and ammunition. So police know that they have a FOID card, and criminals don't. Criminals don't have a FOID card. The stories you hear regularly of a 14-year-old with a gun holding somebody up in Chicago and going around from place to place doing that. Obviously, that 14-year-old does not have a FOID card. Does Cristobal Santana have a FOID card? Would the measure that this network against domestic violence is proposing that would essentially require police to confiscate firearms from somebody facing domestic orders of protection? It's obviously a question that is going to be in front of the legislature. The House already passed one version of it. They're off today, and they passed that during spring session, but they're off today. They canceled today's veto session day. The Senate's back in, not expecting much action, but still, you've got this proposal for orders of protection to lead to required police confiscation of firearms. We'll actually delve deeper into this issue because we did talk with the Illinois Sheriff's Association about how law enforcement are going to be impacted by this requirement if indeed it passes, because as it is right now, if somebody has a FOID card, their FOID card will be suspended if there's a domestic order against them. And again, domestic orders don't necessarily have that due process element. There's stages of orders of protection where you can get to a more permanent order, but really, the shorter term orders, there's no true due process there. So these are all questions we'll delve into tomorrow. But regardless, you've got the political hay being made already out of the tragedy of somebody being murdered in Chicago, the suspect coming down to Springfield, and allegedly shooting an Illinois State Police trooper in the leg. So clearly this is gonna develop as well over time. And Karina's bill, if indeed that does move forward, how that's going to look and what law enforcement concerns are. But I still have yet to hear back from Illinois State Police if Santana had a FOID card, because they're pointing to this particular incident as why we need this law. Well, incident would only be relevant if indeed Cristobal Santana had a FOID card. So that'll be something else that we update you on as well. So clearly a lot of things happening there. But coming back, we got to talk about, I guess, the lack of legislative action and some spirited debates about a bill that only impacts 200 people and a variety of other things. Yesterday was the last day this week of the House fall veto session for this week. They've got 3 days scheduled in November, but the Senate's back in today. So we'll take a look at all of that coming up. I'm Greg Bishop. It's Bishop on Air. Thanks for hanging out. We've got more coming up. All right, stay tuned.